Howdy. Welcome to Practical Principles. This is Practical Prince. Today's our philosophy segment. So we're going over higher powers and how they might fit into, our view of things. So last time we were talking, and we found it useful to come up with this category of you and other things like you. Now, this is a bit vague, and it varies somewhat person to person. So that's why there's this gray area. It's not a well-defined line. For example, some people would include animals inside the circle. Others would keep them outside. At a certain point, it's up to the individual, at least for now. We haven't figured out a way to, I guess, what would be the right way of phrasing that? We haven't found a system that we think scales beyond the individual. There's similarities between individuals, but like in this case with the animals, we don't have enough consistency where we can extract something definitive. And so today, what we're going to do is talk about where higher powers fit. The rest of this being the world, which obviously includes you and people like you. But you interact with other things, other aspects of the world differently than you do things like yourself. And so we've got a few examples we should look at. So one, we've got higher power. More specifically, we might want to look at of God, and then we've also got the example of superhumans, which is a concept, at least in my experience, comes from Crime and Punishment. I'm sure other people have talked about it. And I put the quotes around it because in the end, you don't really have a superhuman. But we can at least touch on the topic. And so there's an interesting thing here. I'm inclined to throw God inside of this circle, whereas at first glance, I would put higher power outside. With God, I mean, almost by definition, he is humanesque, if not human, depending on your view of him. Like, he has the attributes very similar to you, which totally puts him in the other things like you category. So that's what I mean when I'm talking about God. Obviously, you could find a weird example that doesn't fit that, but so more generally, when I'm talking about higher power in this instance, it's not this specific case where it is human-like. It's the cosmic balance, karma, for example. I don't know if that's considered a higher power to people, but that some balancing force, creative force, I don't know that there's a particularly well-defined. This is intentionally ambiguous to cover all those different types. And I mean, I even had to clarify the distinction there. The reason I exclude higher power is because you can't really, you don't interact with it the same way you do God, for example. With God, you talk to him, he talks to you, and then there's conflict or agreement, so on and so forth. With the higher power concept, it's more like gravity. If you jump, it'll pull you down. If you pull the right lever, you get the right effect. It's like the idea of karma. If you do good things, then good things come back to you. Bad things come back to you. So, what in this sense, there's a principle or principles driving how this interacts with you, but there isn't that abstraction, that communication. It's a force, and it simply is. So it's interesting. Different people, I think, would classify these different. And then by putting God in this category, we get to that interesting stuff like, well, and I wonder, would God be something like animals where some people, that's probably just the distinction with higher power. But we were talking last time about what rules might bind us when interacting with things in this category. And in fact, nope, I don't need that. Let's take a quick look at what we came up with last time. Peaceful interactions, benefit of doubt, self-preservation, defense. Okay, and let me just benefit of the doubt, blah, 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 blah. Where's my go back button? Let's open this back up. And then let's put our rules in here. Real quick, let's drop this down so it doesn't take up quite so much space. Rules, peaceful interaction. There's definitely the self-defense and preservation. Have I already forgotten the second one? Because that was the third. Benefit of doubt. So I think these are kind of interesting. I feel like there's some question about whether people give God benefit of the doubt. God doesn't, I mean, by definition, you can't really attack him per se. I hope nobody minds me gendering him like that. So I don't know that, I mean, this rule is sort of implicitly kept. Peaceful interaction is kind of interesting because a lot of the times, I mean, at a high level, you'll have God's interactions, but he'll also give commandments, which you could consider demands, rules for people. And I don't know. I want to say in all those cases, the people are accepting. And where they're not, there's. I'm trying to think of an example. Because, like, in specific interactions with people, um, he might strike someone down. But is he giving a rule per se? A command? Potentially. I guess you could say so. He's commanding in some way or other. And in that case, he has ultimatum power, which I don't know that we want to go into much. So, because, I mean, that creates a certain inequality there. And I'm not sure. I mean, at first blush, I'd say that's wrong. But at second blush, is it really? I don't know. And I don't have a strong beat on that. I'm inclined to say no in that case. It's not wrong. But that's an interesting example. But yeah, we can explore that more later if we want to dive into a God concept. Looking at superhumans, how might we classify these? There's definitely some relation to human. It's kind of implicit in the word itself. And I guess for those unfamiliar with the concept, it's sort of like a being or entity that's above the law. So, and in the case of crime and punishment, the protagonist commits a crime and eventually is punished, but he was justifying it through this superhuman thinking that he was above the law in some respect. So it's questionable whether this concept even exists. And I think by definition, it doesn't play by the rules. In which case, yeah, I'm inclined to. I mean, when you don't play by the rules, you don't get to be in the circle. But would this still be a gray area, perhaps? I'm not sure I'm comfortable entirely ejecting it from the circle. And why is that? Am I mixing up that human with you and the human we find there? Possibly. Possibly. But if it's an entity saying it's above the law, so in a sense it's similar to God in that regard. I think I might be inclined to put it in the circle, because we don't really have the definition of law in here. I mean, eventually we might get there in some way, but these rules don't go to that extent, which is really what the superhumans concept is based on. So I think I'm inclined to keep them inside, similar to how we're keeping God on the inside. They're just so human. Yeah. And I guess before we end, I'll draw a line between God and higher power just to show that relationship. But I think we've finished. Sorting through how we would do those. Law gets interesting, and maybe that's what we'll cover next time. Maybe not law, but start examining society, you and others like you. So yeah, I feel like we don't have a strong, we don't have very definitive actions you should take. And by that, I'm meaning that you've got so much slack for actions that aren't right or wrong. And I don't know that we've really got, that we'll really find an answer for that. But I'm sure as we get into society and law, there will be some stuff to go over there. So, do I think it'll fill it? Probably not. But we'll find out then. So, yeah. Thanks for joining. I'll send this out on social media probably in a week or so. And until next time.